Picture a peaceful life shattered by an audacious move from those in power, prompting you to reclaim what's yours in the most unexpected, watery way. I remember the day everything changed as if it were yesterday, the sunlight glinting off the dew on the sprawling fields of my family's land, a land I had cherished since childhood. It was a quiet morning in late spring when the knock on my door broke the silence. The person on the other side was from the local homeowners association, an organization I had once respected, until I learned about their secret plans. They had built a water power plant on my land, claiming I had plenty to give. I couldn't believe it. In that moment, a seed of determination took root, and I vowed to reclaim my birthright by any means necessary. As I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of lukewarm coffee, memories of my childhood began flooding in, stories of my father's gentle humor, the warm embrace of the community, and the promise that our land would always be a sanctuary. Yet, here I was, betrayed by the very institution that claimed to uphold the community's best interests. The plant was not just a structure of metal and glass, it was a symbol of greed, an overreach of authority into a personal space that had nurtured generations. At first, I tried to reason with them. I reached out to the HOA board, explaining that my land had been in my family for generations, that every corner held memories, dreams, and the quiet hope of living in harmony with nature. But they were unyielding. They argued that the water power plant was a necessary improvement for the community, an innovation meant to drive progress and prosperity. Their cold, corporate logic made no room for emotion, no space for the deep, personal history woven into the land. Instead, they dismissed my concerns with bureaucratic efficiency, leaving me feeling isolated and powerless. That evening, as I walked along the edge of my property, I gazed at the power plant, a behemoth that now dominated the landscape. Its turbines churned relentlessly, drawing water from the stream that had once been my playground. I recalled the many summers spent splashing in that stream, the laughter of my friends echoing over the water, and a sudden resolve took over me. I knew I couldn't let them erase my family's legacy so easily. Over the next few weeks, I spent countless hours poring over land deeds, historical records, and local ordinances. I discovered loopholes and overlooked clauses that hinted at the possibility of reclaiming my land. However, the more I read, the more I realized that legal battles with an entrenched bureaucracy would be long, exhausting, and ultimately fruitless. Instead, I turned to the one element that had always been a silent ally on my land, water. It started with small acts of defiance. On nights when the power plant hummed with activity, I would walk to the edge of the stream, my eyes scanning the water as if searching for signs of rebellion. I tinkered with old irrigation systems, long abandoned in a dusty shed, and experimented with redirecting minor water flows. At first, these changes were nearly imperceptible, a slight shift in the stream's course here, a subtle change in water pressure there. But I knew that nature, when pushed just the right amount, could become a formidable force. Word soon spread among the neighbors, many of whom had grown weary of the HOA's relentless push for modernization at the cost of community values. They shared hushed conversations over backyard fences, discussing the odd changes in the water's course and the mysterious fluctuations in the local microclimate. Some called it a miracle, others whispered that it was an act of quiet rebellion. I never revealed my hand. I simply let the mystery of nature's retribution unfold. Then came the fateful day when the skies darkened unexpectedly, even though it was midsummer and clear for weeks. I had spent the early hours preparing for what I sensed was coming, a carefully orchestrated cascade of events that would finally force the HOA to reckon with the consequences of their actions. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation as I watched the power plant's turbines churn faster than usual, drawing more water than ever before. I had engineered a series of diversions, channels that I had painstakingly dug, hidden by overgrown wildflowers and tall grasses. These channels were designed to redirect the water flow from the power plant into a reservoir I had quietly constructed behind my property. At the right moment, as the plant pushed its limits, the reservoir would overflow, unleashing a torrent of water that would course through the neighborhood. I could almost hear the collective gasp of the community, the shock of those who had blindly followed the HOA's promises of progress as the floodwaters began to rise. The chain reaction was almost cinematic. In one swift, orchestrated moment, the reservoir burst its confines. Water surged with relentless force, carving a path through the streets and creeping toward the stately homes that the HOA so proudly maintained. The water was both beautiful and terrifying, a living embodiment of nature's raw power, reclaiming what was once taken. Neighbors scrambled for safety as the deluge transformed the familiar landscape into a scene from a dramatic movie. Yet, amid the chaos, I felt an overwhelming sense of clarity and purpose. As the floodwaters reached the HOA's headquarters, a symbol of all the bureaucratic greed that had intruded upon my land, I stood at a distance, observing with a bittersweet mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This was not about simple vengeance. It was about reasserting a natural order that had been disturbed by cold, calculated decisions. The water, which had given life to my family's land for centuries, was now taking back what was rightfully ours. In the days that followed, the neighborhood was transformed. The flood had washed away not only the physical structures built by the HOA, but also the complacency that had allowed such an imposition on our lives. Community meetings were held in basements and living rooms as neighbors came together to rebuild and reimagine a way forward, one that honored the land, respected its history, and embraced the unpredictable beauty of nature. I found myself at the center of these gatherings, not as a rebel, but as someone who had reminded everyone that sometimes the most powerful justice is delivered by the forces of nature. The power plant was eventually dismantled, its remnants serving as a cautionary tale for those who would dare to ignore the whispers of the earth. In its place, the community created a cooperative project, a small, sustainable water management system designed to benefit everyone, not just a privileged few. It was a living monument to resilience and the enduring bond between people and the land that sustains them. Looking back, I know that many would question my methods, debating the ethics of unleashing such a force. But in my heart, I believe that sometimes the natural world has to speak up when human institutions fail to listen. My land had always been more than just a piece of property. It was a legacy, a sanctuary, and ultimately a teacher. And in its own way, it taught me that there is power in unity, strength in nature, and redemption in reclaiming what truly matters. As I continue to walk the paths of that land, now a symbol of renewal rather than ruin, I remain mindful of the delicate balance between progress and preservation. Every time I hear the gentle murmur of a stream or feel the cool breeze that carries the scent of wet earth, I remember the day the water rose, not as a destructive force, but as a clarion call for justice, integrity, and the unyielding spirit of a community united by its past and hopeful for its future. This story, as wild and turbulent as the floodwaters that reshaped our neighborhood, is a reminder to all of us. Sometimes, when you have plenty to give, nature answers in ways that defy expectation, urging us to reclaim our power and honor the legacy of our roots. And so, with every step I take on this land, I carry the memory of that monumental day, a day when the waters spoke, and the truth was undeniable.